Hey there. So, my next guest got into education and really liked educating children, but wanted to do it a little differently. And he had a love of passion and love and passion for esports and video games. And he figured, hey, why don't I put these two things together? So, he started an organization dedicated to working with children, getting them involved in esports, but also showing them that there's a career path and a way to turn their love of video games into something that they can use for the rest of their life. So, this was a wonderful interview. I know you're all going to love it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Gamerpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today, I have a very special guest with us. I have Stan Usovicz. Hey there, Stan. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So what part of the world do you hail from, Stan?
Boston. Well, originally I'm from Salem, Massachusetts. You might have heard about our witch problem.
Still?
We solved it. We got it settled a little while ago, but still famous for it.
Is that town still small, or is that kind of boomed?
It's it's technically a city, and I think there's around 40,000 people that live there. So I don't know. You be the judge.
That's a small city. All right. That's the small talk, Stan. That was it. I want to get right into this. So why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. So I'm Stan Usovicz. I'm the founder of Esports Scholar, and I'm also a member of the United States Esports Association. So those are my two main hustles at the moment.
Beautiful. All right. Okay. Now, before we kind of go any further, I start every interview with a single question because I have to know something about you, Stan, before we get any further into this. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how weird are you?
So I think I'm a pretty solid 7, I would say. You know, just weird enough, maybe, but not too weird, hopefully.
What makes you weird?
Well, I guess more unusual than weird. I've had some experiences I think that are a little bit different. Like I studied abroad for the full time in Scotland, so that was definitely a different experience. I played rugby, even though I was in America and I played on a semi-pro team. Other things that make me weird, I guess, are maybe my taste in comedy. I'm a big fan of Eric Andre and like Tim and Eric and those kinds of guys as well.
Okay. Sounds pretty standard fare, but okay. Sounds good.
Maybe a 5. Okay.
All right. All right. So this is the Gamerpreneur podcast, Stan. So I do need your gaming cred. When did you first start playing video games?
Sure. So the first time the first ever game I played was Backyard Baseball, 2003. But the first game I ever played very seriously was FIFA. And I honestly got into gaming, like I'd mentioned, I was a rugby player, but I had a pretty severe concussion. And after that, I wasn't really able to play a lot of the sports I loved. So I was mostly playing video games with my friends as a way to, on some level satiate that competitive drive, but on another level just to socialize. And FIFA was a huge game for me, especially starting out.
Were you the winner?
Not at first. It took a long time because I was playing against guys who had to put in a serious amount of time at first. And it was kind of like a trial by fire a little bit, but I definitely got through it after 4 years. So I was winning some by the end.
All right. Beautiful. And I'm assuming you've continued to play video games.
Naturally, yeah. So a big game my main game at the moment is Rocket League. So I've been grinding on Rocket League. I also play a little bit of League of Legends, but I'm a Wood 3 at the moment, and a bit of Smash Brothers too.
Okay, fantastic. So you cover all the esports then.
Okay. I guess.
Now here, Stan, if you had to choose one game as your all-time favorite though, which one would it be?
I gotta say Rocket League. I really do. I think it's I know this might not be a huge factor for a lot of people, but one thing that's really cool about Rocket League is the idea that there's no randomness, like computerized randomness, and you have complete control over what you're doing. There's no like pass button or shoot button, so you really have to figure out how to masterfully maneuver your car. So I think that's a really interesting kind of angle on a sport game that I really enjoy.
100%. They've done a fantastic job on that game.
Yeah.
All right, let's get over to the preneur part. So, why don't you begin by giving us your professional background? So, why don't you start in college? Why did you go to Scotland?
Well, I went to Scotland because I always wanted to go to the University of St. Andrews, and it was the
You a
first.
golfer?
I hit some balls, but I don't think I could consider myself a golfer, really. I had visited there when I was a young kid, and I just remember thinking that was my idea of a university, and I always wanted to go there. I applied. I 2 weeks after I applied, I was accepted, and it was just it seemed like a dream come true at the moment. But then after I finished, I found myself in the position of moving back to the States. So that was a bit of a challenge. I moved to New York, and that was definitely a bit of a hustling place to be at the time. And I'm excited that I did that because in New York, I was able to first start out as a tutor, and I built a network of students and whatnot. And through my tutor group is actually how I became part of a company called Concord Education. Concord Education does a range of different after school type activities. And really, I saw the opportunity there, especially within esports. And I've gone off on my own, started Esports Scholar.
Okay, so to pull a Zoolander here, but why esports?
Why esports? So, really, I think that esports are the levelest playing field to have ever existed. And I think that a lot of kids don't get a chance to represent, either themselves or their school, or they're not part of a club, or they're not part of some kind of team. And esports is a really cool way to re-engage those kids and actually acknowledge the skills that they have, because for far too long it's just been completely taken for granted. And I know it might not be obvious, but a lot of these skills will be helpful as we move forward into AI and being able to manipulate machineries and whatnot.
Okay, so then how does that relate to your organizations?
Sure. So, Esports Scholar, what we are is an after school league, coaching service, and instructional provider as well. So, what we do is we get kids to compete in our league, but we also teach them STEAM skills. So, things like how to design your logo, how to edit videos, how to set up Streamlabs and make overlays, and also how to broadcast. So, with those skills, we're able to give kids, educational takeaways on top of having them participate in something they love. So, it's been really rewarding. And I think that a lot of the kids, at the end of the day, my main goal is to make sure that like what we do is the best thing they did that day at school. So I really pride myself on achieving that for some kids, I hope.
Okay, so why working with high schoolers or middle schoolers, college kids? Where are you at, and why did you focus that particular demographic?
Sure. So mostly high schoolers, some middle schoolers. Honestly, because it's esports, it's a little bit different, right? Like you could have some sixth grader who's insane and can easily beat a whole group of high schoolers. So in that way, the age difference doesn't really matter, as drastically as it does in traditional sports. And I'm sorry, what was your original question
Why
there?
did you choose that demographic? What is it
Oh,
about
why
working with
then?
kids as opposed to, just a local game club?
Right. So I think high schoolers you know, are able to kind of handle things in a more mature way than a lot of the times we give them credit. I think working with younger kids, it's a tough line because honestly, one thing we are conscious of is the idea that like gaming addiction is a real thing, and maybe you have to be a little bit older, a little bit more responsible to actively engage in like a full-on esports program, and also by that age maybe you have a little bit of a better sense of where your skill abilities are, like where you want to fit in or what kind of career or college you want to go to.
Okay, now part of my show, like I'll be all minute, Stan. I've had a very hard time finding anybody making any money in esports. How
Mhm.
how is your organization earning money?
It's a grind. But I think it's one that ultimately will work out in the long run. I think by building slowly and getting as many people in and getting testimonials and getting them to see the results of it, I think a lot more schools will join on. I mean, there's a lot of schools in this country, so.
Sure. And what are the biggest challenges you're having? Is it parents?
Honestly, I think there is for the most part, the people I speak to are school administrators. And, don't mean anything by this, but a lot of them happen to be 50 or 60 years old, and they don't necessarily see, the value of esports because there is a generational divide, especially in esports. And some people, I had one person ask me, is it like, Atari? And not quite, but it's evolved quite a bit since Atari. And really, I think the biggest change that people have failed to recognize is that once you went from beating whoever you could in your living room to now competing against people online, that created a whole new avenue of like competition, and really people became so much better. So it's really spurred the growth of esports. I don't think we would see esports in the same way if it weren't for the online competitions.
Okay. And where do you intend for your business to go?
So I really think that there's a lot of value in starting out locally. So we've been trying to build our network as strong as possible in the New England region. And I think through making those local connections, hopefully we'll become, the name for esports in the Northeast.
Beautiful. Okay. Now, Stan, let's talk a little more personally about you. Okay. Maybe loosen up a little bit. What what makes this your passion? Like, is it the video games aspect? Is it getting to play video games? Is it the children? Like, what is it for you that makes you want to do this? And again, why esports?
Right. So I think that really what it's all about for me is that I see kids, just I see their joy in being part of this, right? And that is a huge factor. I mean, I see kids who might come out of their shells, who might not necessarily relate with one another or speak to one another, and really open up and kind of build a bit of confidence. And it is exciting to see that, to see people just embrace something. And I know that a lot of the times where I kind of see myself fitting into all of this and why esports and why those kids is that I think there just needs to be a bridge again between the generational divide, between other cultural divides too. And I kind of see myself as someone kind of in between that. I can talk to school administrators and kids just as easily, and I feel like I understand where they're both coming from. So I kind of see myself as like a mediator.
Fantastic. Okay. Now, what has it been like starting and running this business, setting aside the esports, setting aside all of that, like actually being an entrepreneur? How's that been going?
One thing about being an entrepreneur is that you have to be very honest with yourself. Like you have to know your strengths, you have to know your weaknesses, and you honestly just have to persevere. I think it's just about waking up every day, and even if yesterday was horrible, you keep at it, because that's the only way ultimately you're going to have any kind of success.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's a fortune cookie answer. Okay. No, like seriously, you're in the dirt. Like, how is it being an entrepreneur? Has it been good? Has it been rough? Like, is it stressful? Do you sleep at night? Do you have time to play video games anymore?
Well, honestly, I think I had the advantage of, this wasn't my first startup. We started Concord Education from nothing. By the time I left there, they were doing very well. So I had that experience of kind of grinding it out. So I knew in the back of my mind, like, I've already done this once before. Obviously, it's hard starting again, but there's something exciting about it too. It's like after you've just gone through a breakup and you start a new relationship, it takes a little bit of work again, but it's exciting, and you're happy to do it.
Love it. Okay. Now, what makes you good at this, Dan? There's lots of people out there who would love to start esports education and related businesses, right? In fact, I've already interviewed several on this show.
Yeah.
but there's plenty more out there who are aspirational. They'd love to go for it. They just don't have that whatever it takes. What is it that you have that they don't?
I think I work harder than anybody else. I mean, on some level, that's really what it comes down to. I think that there's people out there with more money than I do. There's people who are more intelligent than I am, but I just persevere. I just keep going. And I think that's been kind of the key for it. I think a big part of that is I think my passion for this comes across to people. And I think excitement is contagious. So that's really what I think my main key to all this is.
Okay. Would you say you're a people person?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think I can definitely be alone, but at the same time, it is nice being around people, especially now after the pandemic. It's I definitely have missed more interaction. And I think we're all just like kind of readjusting to what it's like to be around people all the time. But it's also nice.
Okay. What has it been like reaching out to these school administrators? Obviously, I understand they don't quite get it, but from a business perspective, I want the show to be not just about you. I want it to be about the advice that you can give to people out there. Say someone wants to go into the same line of work you are, maybe slightly separately, maybe in another state or country. How do you actually do that? Do you pick up the phone, just I'd like to speak to an administrator, or like how does that work?
So I think that obviously everything has to be built ahead of time. It's kind of like the field of dreams type approach. If you build it, they'll get over there eventually. And on some level, it is just hitting the phones. Yes, definitely. I think there's we're lucky now in the time we live in to have so many different avenues of getting your messaging or just your ideas out there. So obviously with picking up the phone and calling someone, that's a pretty ineffective way, but there's plenty of others in terms of like we use social media pretty frequently. It's not necessarily led to that many sales, but it's also helping in just kind of getting the word out.
Okay. Let's get real deep on this nuts and bolts of messaging. How do you reach out to somebody the first time? Do you lead with, hey, this is who we are, this is what we provide, and then just hope and pray that that goes through? Or do you take more of a, hey, we want to help your students? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it at first is not it coming at it expecting that people don't know anything about it, because a lot of times I think with a lot of messaging from that we've used to put out or I've seen from others, it's almost like you assume the person knows exactly what you're talking about. Some level it has to be broken down and also has to be relevant to the person you're reaching out to. So if I'm gonna send a message to a athletic director, it's gonna be worded differently and have different focuses than when I'm reaching out to someone who's like an instructional technologist, right? Because there's different aspects of esports that both of them can cling on to, but it's just a matter of making sure your messaging fits perfectly for who that person is.
Okay, beautiful. Now, what resources have you had to turn to in order to learn how to do this a little better? Obviously, you had a company beforehand, but this is a little different, right?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm lucky that I've come in contact with a former superintendent of assistant superintendent of schools for Boston, Herb Levine, and superintendent of schools in Salem, Alice Davis. They've been huge in terms of giving me not only resources and inspiration, but just helping me kind of walk through my idea and help make it make sense in the eyes of a school administrator. So those two people have been extremely influential and helpful.
Okay, beautiful. Now, Stan, I wanna get in a time machine with you. We're gonna go back in time, okay?
Okay.
We're gonna go, we'll say, back when you first decided to fly off to Scotland, or as you're on the plane, okay? And if you can go and you can sit next to little Stan back then on the plane, all right? You're gonna tell him the entire story, everything that happened to you from that moment until now. All the good, all the bad, all the ups, all the downs. You can impart every lesson and piece of knowledge you've gotten along the way. But if there was only one thing he absolutely had to know, what would that one thing be?
That you have to live in the moment you're in, because you take a lot of things for granted, and for instance, I was in Scotland all this time. There was plenty of things that I thought I would do just because it was right there, but I never ended up doing. So I think it's really capturing the moment you're in and living it to the fullest. I know that sounds corny as hell, but it is very true. I feel like a lot of these advice things are corny, but they also have a lot of truth in them.
Absolutely. Okay. And from a business entrepreneurial standpoint, what do you wish you had known when you first started out?
I guess one thing that I wish I had known is how much legal documentation and all of this you need to sift through. Yeah, I think that, and I think also I think I wish I knew a little bit more about how difficult it would be just to get your first few clients. But really, once that happens, it's once you get over that hurdle, it becomes so much easier. And I think I was really beating myself up at first before I had clients, and once they came, it was a huge relief, and it only invites other people to come into it also.
Absolutely. Okay, Stan, a little more personal now. You see, I actually believe that we learn the most from our life from our failures, not necessarily our successes. Because when you succeed the first time you try something, you may not know what happened. It might have been luck, who knows, right? But when you fail, you got to take a look at it. You got to figure out what went wrong to be able to iterate until you get to the point where you succeed in the future. So I'd like to ask you, Stan, what do you consider your biggest failure in life, and what did you learn from it?
So I think I failed at being a New Yorker.
You seem
Ultimately,
too nice.
maybe that could have been part of it. I think that really, that's one thing that I just think ultimately I just didn't make enough of the opportunity of being in New York, but I also just uh, didn't fit in perfectly. I know that's not maybe a great example of failure, but I had a very rough time there, and there was definitely a lot of learning moments throughout. Like, for instance, when I was a tutor, I failed to consider that, there's times a year where it's a lull. It's like you might have had this one season where everyone's rushing to get their SAT prep or whatever, and, you're running from house to house, but there's times where there's lulls. And one of the things I actually did during that very low time was do you know the brand Supreme, like the clothing?
Mhm.
Yeah, I used to resell Supreme on top of everything else that I was doing. I wait in line, get the newest drop, put it up online, and resell it. But you know, I think through those moments of, like, definitely I wouldn't consider them my proudest moments or whatnot. You learn a lot about yourself, and you learn about how to just really just, I don't know, how to motivate yourself, because at the end of the day, at first you really have to look out for yourself and your own well-being and the people around you, but because nobody else is going to do that for you. So
100%.
yeah.
Okay, on the flip side of that question, what is something that you're working to improve on yourself today?
Sure. So I think that a big piece for me is honestly my health. I feel like at some point when you reach middle age, you kind of realize, like, oh God, it's not gonna get better.
Dude, did you just say middle age? You can't be older than I am.
No, well, I don't know. Maybe middle age is too much, but I'm just saying, when you get a little bit older, you start to realize, like, this is going downhill, not uphill at at the moment. So you gotta really strive for it. I think that honestly, yeah, just health and working out is a big part of what I'm trying to improve. And I think that people don't give enough credit to how well, I'm sure plenty of people do, but working out really improves your state of mind as well, and it helps you in terms of tackling some of the things that you might encounter at work, or just struggling on getting things done on the computer. So I think that health is a big piece for me.
Okay, wonderful. One more fun question before I bring this in for landing. Okay, Stan. What is something that you think people misunderstand about you the first time they meet you?
Sure. So I think that a lot of people might assume that I, am just like, not as passionate about things, or I don't know. I'm not sure if that's comes across. I think maybe people might assume that I'm a young person who doesn't really know what they're doing, but I think that I got a bit more going on than a lot of people give me credit for. So
Wonderful. All right, Stan, this has been a fantastic interview. How do people find you? Where are you at on social media, contact information, all that, please?
sure. So Stan at Esports Scholar is my email. In terms of socials, we have LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. They're all Esports Scholar. So if you'd like to follow us there, we'd be happy to have you.
Beautiful. All right, and as we wrap this up, do you have any final thoughts you want to share? Anything I didn't ask you think we still need to cover?
No, I think you did a great job, and I really appreciate being on the show. It's awesome.
Absolutely, Stan. I actually genuinely appreciate you taking the time to come on with us. I really do. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Yeah, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for everybody else, I'm going to remind you all, don't be just a gamer, be a gamerpreneur.